Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this Society of Economic Geologists panel discussion on the impacts of COVID-19 on the mining and mineral exploration industry. I'm Tim MacIntyre, an SEG member since 2003 and recent PhD graduate. And like many of you, I've directly felt the impact of the global pandemic on our industry. I'm honored to have been asked to host this conversation today. I hope you'll find it informative and thought-provoking. So this event was organized by the SEG Early Career Professionals Committee, and special thanks is due to Isaac Simon for organizing the bulk of this event. The main goal of this committee is to help bridge the gap between university and professional life by implementing programs that benefit early career professionals as well as senior level students and recent graduates. The ECP committee also strives to engage with and represent the interests of early career professionals within the society. If you're interested in being involved or you would like to learn more, you can find additional info on the SEG webpage under the Students and Early Career tab. So today we have a wonderful cross-section of early career and seasoned industry professionals working throughout the Americas who have generously volunteered to share their insights. A big thank you to Joaquin, Erika, Susan, and Zach for taking the time to be with us today. In a minute, I'll have them introduce themselves after we do a few more announcements. So today the conversation will involve a 45-minute panel discussion where we'll cover 4 major topics, followed by 30 minutes for question and answer. Please feel free to submit questions using the Q&A box as you think of them. I'll keep an eye out for questions to contribute to the conversation as we go along, and also we'll try to answer any of the remaining questions during the Q&A session at the end. The goal is to wrap up the session after 90 minutes, which would be 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time. Apologize in advance if there are any questions we're unable to get through. So also a quick reminder that the second part of our COVID-19 panel discussion on impacts to academia will take place tomorrow morning. So be sure to tune in again for that. Had an opportunity to watch the planning session, and there were some interesting ideas being discussed, especially in the realm of remote learning and virtual field trips. So be sure to check that out. So now we have a poll question that I'll try to share with you. Let's see. Does anybody see the question? There we go. So we give about 45 seconds here to go ahead and answer this question, see how it comes out. Looks like most people have stayed employed, but quite a few out there who've seen some changes. All right. So there we go. It looks like 59% employment status has not changed. 22% have changed to a different company. 11% currently furloughed or laid off, and 7% promoted to a greater responsibility role. So quite a bit of change out there in a relatively short time period. So I guess what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and get started with the panel. I'll go ahead and have Joaquin start us off introducing himself, and go ahead, Joaquin.
Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for having me today. I think it's a really interesting discussion this evening. I'm Joaquin Copaja. I'm exploration geologist for the metal exploration team here at BHP based in Santiago, in Chile. And my work is currently focused in porphyry copper exploration, both in northern and central Chile. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Joaquin. Next up, we have Erika Sweeney.
Hi, everybody. I'm Erika Sweeney, and I work for Riverside Resources. I work down in Mexico and Canada, as Riverside is a project generator down in both countries. So I'm currently the manager for exploration projects and corporate development.
Great. Thanks, Erika. Next up, we have Susan Lomas.
Hi, thank you very much, Tim. And thank you, for inviting me to participate in this panel. It is going to be an interesting discussion. So I am an exploration, have been a mine geologist, an exploration geologist, and now economic geologist with mineral resource estimations and 43101 reports. I have been a geologist for the last 30 years, and I currently run my own consulting company that I started in 2006, many years ago, which has taken me throughout my career to at least 30 different countries. So I'm used to kind of being on a plane or on the road somewhere. And so we'll talk about some of those changes later in the discussion.
And finally, we have Zach Palmer out in Nevada.
Thanks, Tim. My name is Zach. I'm currently a mine geologist or controlled geologist with Nevada Gold Mines at the Gold Strike open pit. I graduated from CSM 2019, so excited to have a first job here at Gold Strike.
Cool. All right. Thanks everybody for being here. I really appreciate it. And so now we'll go ahead and start off with question number 1, which has to do with health and morale. So the question is, how has the pandemic affected the morale of company personnel? What kind of operational changes had to be made to ensure everyone's safety from COVID-19? I guess I'd like to start off with Sue, because I think she's had an opportunity to work with a variety of different companies during the pandemic. So I'd be interested to hear what she's seen and heard.
Okay, from the beginning of this in the early spring, when everything hit and everybody shut down and froze, of course, the gold price went up, and we started. We've been busy all through this phase. I even had to do a site visit to Finland in August of this year, and that was a challenge logistically, even just getting into the country. But managed to do it, all sorts of protocols once we got there, but nothing set by the company. It was totally, you had to kind of research yourself how, face masks and what Finland was requiring. We got informed at the border, and but consulting geologists, we either work for a consulting company, a larger firm, and most of those had been resistant before this to have workers working at home. So that's been a change for a lot of consulting geologists, that they're now working at home. And running my own company with my husband, we work it together. We've always worked from home. So that was not an adjustment for us. But as you said, working with all sorts of different clients and listening to all of their protocols, dealing with them at home as opposed to being in the office. But also, I've got clients that are very careful. They have one project in a small northern Ontario town, and they don't want to be the ones bringing COVID into it. So they have all sorts of strict mandates. Anybody going into site has to have a COVID test before they go. They rent apartments, so they're not in hotels, and they have to stay within the bubble of whoever else they're working with. They can go shopping, of course, for groceries, but the preference is to eat in the apartment and not in the restaurants, not really go out into the community. And site visits, like I said, they've been a problem. The commissions for 43101s are still insisting on site visits, and particularly when mineral resources are involved, particularly when they're indicated or measured level, not so concerned about early level projects with just inferred resources. So there's lots of discussions with the commission in terms of which countries, you're expected to go to, and whether you feel comfortable doing that at this time, or if it can be postponed, or if you can take an older site visit, and if that's going to be acceptable for now. So it's a lot of discussions with the commission on things like that.
It's interesting. Yeah, thanks, Sue. So I'm curious how things are done in Chile. Joaquin.
Yes, so I think it's a very good question, a very fair question. And referring to the first point on the morale, on the effect on the morale of the team, I think I can quite well answer or summarize this answer with 3 fundamental words that I think were the most common I hear from my colleagues at the very beginning of the pandemic. And those words are, I will say, uncertainty, anxiety, and stress. I think we all of us present here at the beginning of the pandemic, we ask ourselves, what will happen next? What will happen to our job? What will happen to my family, to my life, to my daily routine? Then lockdown came and a lot of things changed for us. I think that's when anxiety hit us really, really hard. A really interesting fact is that at the beginning of the pandemic, here at BHP, we had to fill a wellness survey. So in a weekly basis, you just need, it was completely anonymous. You just need to fill your age group and answer some question. And interestingly, to say the least, the most affected group, because later you will see the statistics, the most affected group was the youngest age group, from 24 to 32. I think I can relate. I mean, I think as a young adult or early career professionals, we usually are living alone, away from family. We haven't formed our own family yet, you know. So I think isolation and being confined, usually in a small flat, I think hit us hard. Luckily for us, at least in BHP, at the very beginning of the pandemic, they put available for all employees a massive amount of mental health resources. We had a very strong also employee assistance program with very good and professional psychologists in case you need them. So at least in my case, I feel really supported by the company at the very beginning and through the pandemic. I think another very common comment I hear from my colleagues at the start of the pandemic was the difficulty of separating work from personal life. I mean, when you are at the office, it's really easy. You have your space for working is the office. Then you go out of the office and you forget about and you start your personal life. But I remember a comment from one of my colleagues, and he will say, I wake up at 8, I start working at 9, and I stop working at 9 p.m. and then restart the cycle. It's like I can never disconnect myself from work. So we all had to learn how to deal with this. Here in Chile, we are not so used to work from home. I think it's some cultural thing. But I think we are all getting used to this new way of work. In the operational side, the first measure at the beginning of the pandemic, we had suspension of all field activities until further notice. Sanitary conditions were rapidly evolving and changing, so we were put all activities that we had planned. We had drilling planned, we had geophysical activities planned, geological field trips. They were all put on standby. We at the very beginning we were put in remote working from home. But eventually, during lockdown, the team acknowledged the fact that we eventually will need to come back to the office and to the field. So the team spent a very good amount of time preparing and creating the protocols to come back safely to the office and to the field. That was the TARP, the Trigger Action Response Plan. Eventually, we came back to the office, but under very strict sanitary measures. We divide the office in 2 groups: one working from home, one working from the office, alternating weeks. This was aimed to reinforce and to allow to maintain social distancing at the office. we know how to wear permanently masked with at the office. I mean, no matter where you are, if you're sitting alone at your desk, you need to use your mask permanently. We have reinforced hygiene measures at the office. Now we have soap dispensary all over the place. So far we have been working like this, and so far so good. We haven't had any outbreak at the office, so at least the office has been a safe place at the moment. And you also mentioned local communities. At the very beginning of the pandemic, VHP has maintained a permanent contact with our communities in which we operate. In particular, Peru and Ecuador offices made great donation and contribution to local communities, from advanced stage project to early stage project. We did donations mainly on food and basic hygiene products for local communities. And in Chile, VHP has also supporting local providers, local communities. We have been doing facilities in terms of payment and things like that.
Great, thanks. So I guess I'd like to contrast that then with Zach in Nevada. How are things there in terms of morale and health and impact on local communities? We got you muted right now, Zach.
So far, Elko's been kind of the hub of Northeast Nevada, where majority of people live. We have smaller communities outside, but so far we've followed all local, state, and federal guidelines to try and keep our personnel safe. So Nevada Gold Mines is a JV between Newmont and Barrick, employs nearly 7,000 people between late-stage exploration projects to 10 to 12 mines within the state. So it's difficult to get that amount of personnel to sites. So we've cut down on people in buses and company vehicles to minimize those risks. We've started to increase a little bit more people coming to site. We have, I would say, most people come back to site now compared to March and April. We still require to wear face masks. We've minimized the amount of people within general meeting areas. So it's been difficult. It's not easy to change from the norm, but we've done our best. We've tried to keep cases down as much as possible. Stuff's starting to reopen, the bars, restaurants, movie theater in town. So we've been doing pretty well, but morale was definitely fairly low at the beginning of it, right? But right now we're doing, I'd say, extraordinarily better since the start of this pandemic.
Could you expand a little bit on some of the changes that you've seen in terms of the safety? I know a lot, especially in Nevada, there's a lot of busing and things like that. How are you handling that?
So right now the buses are every other seat has a person. There's designated seating spots in meeting areas, which stay 6 feet apart. The company vehicles get cleaned, as well as those buses as well. That's pretty much been the major changes. Will I see it go back? We'll see how these cases go. We're fairly remote towns between Elko and Spring Creek, so any large spikes directly impacts the mining industry, which is the second largest employer within the state.
And what's the testing been like there?
Testing has been, if you've been in contact with somebody, we've got COVID apps now that says if you've been in contact with someone for X amount of minutes, they're recommending that you get tested. We've had daily temperature checks up until around November. Once it gets fairly cold out, to have people testing, getting your temperature checks. So they've provided temperature, thermometers for people to take them at home, and questionnaires for when you come back off of your days off.
Great, thanks. All right, Erika, you want to round us off on health and morale?
Well, that's actually extremely interesting to see two different sides, because you have Susan here that is talking about as a company's owner, how do you see it, and how it's been pretty exciting for the company, but on the other side, it's been restricting. And on the other side, when you look at major companies in mines, it's been stressful and a lot of anxiety. And I've seen a little bit of both when it comes to my job. That means that, yes, we hit March when everything happened, and suddenly it's a lot of stress because you don't know, it's uncertainty. But uncertainty, the first thing I thought was not really my job, was how can I take advantage of it? Because gold price was going up. And it was, I mean, it's something to think about, because that's when all the money came in the mining industry, right? And that's how people today, I mean, when you look at companies today, there was just so much investment coming in the like exploration companies. It was, I mean, sorry about that, but it was insane. Like every day you would see the news and it was like millions of dollars like flowing in. That took a little bit, 1 to 2 months to really get all that money flowing in, because even the investors were a little not quite sure how things were going to go when it comes to the worldwide, like the government and everything else, how people and how businesses and how countries were going to react to the pandemic. So we were not really sure how this was going to go. As of for us, for me, it's particularly difficult because I live in the US and I work in Canada and Mexico. So how to tell you that I left PDAC and I arrived at home and I was like, well, I can't go to work anymore, which is difficult, right? Because when you're a geologist, when you're generating projects and when you're dealing with people selling projects, you got to meet people, you got to be in the field, you got to take people to the field and show them what is worth, what your project is worth. And that's when it gets extremely complicated. And we saw companies putting together those virtual field trip, etc. I'm still a little skeptical to that, but I guess it's the new normal, if we can call it this way. A new normal of working from home as a geologist, which is weird when you're a field geologist. A new normal. I mean, so that's when it comes to work, right? Then there's also the part of when you're on site. So I did have to travel a lot personally. I spent 3 months in Canada and I did the quarantine and everything that came with it in April. Because like I said, you got to go to work. And I mean, this is personal because I had to go 3 months away from my family, from my husband, right? I'm not the only one that did that. There's a lot of people that I met in the industry that actually had to go away from their house for multiple months, and they have families and, young child and everything else. So it's difficult. It's really difficult when it comes to your psychological, right? It can be pretty difficult. But however, you want to keep your job. So that's another point that is extremely important. So you do it because you want to keep your job and you want to move things forward because you don't have a choice anyway. And so now there's also something that is extremely important is when you're on site. So Riverside has a lot of different projects. Like I said, we generate projects. So that means we have multiple ones in Canada as well as Mexico. Both countries are, I want to say, pretty different when it comes to COVID safety and the culture in general. Canada has been terrible for us in the sense that I can't get in the country anymore. Even if mining is very important, unfortunately, not everybody in the mining industry can actually cross the border. Then you can go to your project anymore because you have to be extremely careful with the population. the local communities. You do not want to be the one that's going to bring the virus to small communities. This is really bad, just like Susan was talking about. It's for the company, for you, for anything, you do not want to risk that. So that's one of the reasons, even if you could travel, you don't do it because you never know. And even if you take a test before leaving or when you get there, you're still in contact with other people and you never know what can happen in between. So that's why it's a lot of uncertainty and you have to be extremely careful. When it comes to Mexico, we actually started one drilling program in August, September, which, so we had to put everything together and start the drilling program during a pandemic, which is particularly interesting because you had to hire people. And, you know, the mining industry does not know border. But this time you cannot bring your own geologist. So we already have a local team, which is extremely important. And I'm really happy that Riverside has a really good local team and we were able to use them. However, you need more people, you have to hire local, but everybody does the same thing. So there was this period, March, April, where a lot of people lost their job. And then suddenly there's a little peak around June where everybody got hired again. And the thing is, that's exactly the same timing I was looking for people. And unfortunately, it can be in Canada or in Mexico, because you have to hire local, which is great, but we were running out of people. It was, you know, you're trying to hire somebody and he's gone already. So there was a kind of a little challenge here and there that we had. I mean, I'm really happy for everybody that got hired, and that means it's great, right? It's great that everybody get a job. It's just that as a manager, when I need to actually hire somebody, it gets a little difficult. So that was the little tricky thing. So you get like really positive points, and at the same time, it gets really difficult. We had to set up exploration camps, and exploration camps, obviously, we had to have extremely, we had to have a lot of procedure when you get to a camp, because you do not want everybody, and we're dealing with drillers, we're dealing with geologists and logistics and helpers. They're on site at all time, and you do not want one person to get it or everybody get it. Right. So obviously, it's every time you go to camp, you have to take a test, then you get there, it's masked all the time. You have to sanitize your hand all the time. It's a whole procedure, and it's a new way of life that you have to get used to, but you really have to force yourself to get used to it until it becomes just a normal thing to do.
You know, it's been my perception that maybe a lot of the majors kind of had testing in place relatively early on. I was just curious, kind of working for more of a junior company, if you had any struggles getting tests so that you could get employees taking them.
It depends on the country. In the US, yes, I have a really hard time to get tested in the US. When I go to Mexico, there's zero issue. No matter who you are, if you work for a company, if you don't work for a company, you just show up at the lab, you get tested right away, as many times as you wish as well. Canada is, it depends. When I was out there, it was early on, so they did not have enough to get tested. So that was a little tricky, I want to say, but yes, I think there's a difference in that for sure. And there's also a difference in working on site versus working from home type of thing, right? So that's why, but that's a good question for sure.
Yeah, good, thank you. I think Sue wanted to make another point regarding the family balance and this COVID. So go ahead, Sue.
Yeah, Erika brought that up. So I'd wanted to just revisit that because I do have two kids. I have a 10-year-old and a 16-year-old, so elementary school or primary school and high school. And particularly in the spring with the lockdown, they shut the schools down right after spring break in April. So the kids were at home, plus we work from home. So I think, that's a struggle that a lot of parents are facing, that you've got not only the extra work that came our way was the extra work with the homeschooling and just, having them be there and frustrated themselves and upset because they can't go to school. On the flip side of that too was, when I did do that site visit to Finland on an international return to Canada, by law, I had to do a 14-day quarantine. And we are lucky we have sort of a little cottage in our backyard that is our office. And so it's got a bedroom and a kitchen and kitchenette kind of a thing. So I could quarantine and sort of stand on the balcony and still see the kids running around, and it was summer, so it wasn't bad. But, having those forced quarantines when you have to do a 3-day site visit and then you've got to quarantine for 14 days afterwards makes a lot of tough decisions on whether you're going to take that job on.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for that insight. So I think Erika kind of touched on the financial aspects, that maybe there's a bit of an opportunity, particularly in the gold space, but also some challenges in getting employees and things like that. Would you like to start us off with kind of the financial situation? I'll read the question here. It was, how has the pandemic affected the financial situation of your project, mine, or company, particularly with respect to financing exploration, budget cuts, layoffs and furloughs, hiring, cost of operating in mid-pandemic, and the market itself? Do you want to expand on kind of what you were touching on there, Erika?
Sure. Actually, so I mean, it's a little difficult to answer in our case because what happened is we already had a lot going on before the pandemic. So the pandemic has not really impacted what was going on before, which we were really lucky because I know that it did impact over companies and over projects. So no, it was, we did not get impacted financially when it comes to that. Totally the other way, we actually saw a lot going on. And, I mean, I talk about when it comes to my case, but it's also the case for multiple companies. It's when you own a little bit of equity in some companies, and you saw that past March, when you got into April, that the market picked up back up, then obviously for everybody, it's pretty interesting because you know that in between companies, they obviously own part and equities. So when you think about that, you know that their market cap is pretty much growing. So in general, it was a pretty good thing in general. Then when it comes to money flowing and also expenditure, yes, there is a lot more expenditure that comes into account. Getting a lot of COVID tests, that has a price. This is not free. I mean, it's just like the government does not give it for free everywhere. So the company has to pay for it. Then everything for sanitizing, the mask, all of that has a cost, right? So this is something to take in account. And so yes, it kind of had a low impact, and somehow, yes.
Yeah. Joaquin, working for a big company like BHP, what have you noticed anything financially?
Yeah, well, fortunately for us, BHP has maintained a solid financial situation through all the pandemic. The operational continuity of our mine was assured through strict sanitary measures. This included massive testing for all employees and contractors at sites. This to avoid any outbreak at sites. Only critical operation functions remain on site. Non-administrative and non-critical employees were remaining working from home. So I think also production decreased a little bit, but that was totally expected. Copper prices have also contributed to this solid financial situation. We have seen an outstanding rally from copper prices in mid-March, so it's only going up. I think to a maximum of 7 years now. So how has this financial situation impacted in exploration for a major company as BHP? Luckily, again, for us, we haven't seen any budget cuts, but reorganization of the budgets. This is due to all postponed activities we had. As I say before, we had drilling plan, geophysical activities that could not be executed. So we just had to relocate the budget to the next year. So we hadn't had any budget cut. Exploration programs remain the same. Projects remain the same. We don't have any breakdown. In terms of layoff and furlough, fortunately, again, we haven't seen any furlough or any layoff related to the pandemic, I mean. And conversely, I think BHP acknowledged the fact that exploration is a long-term success. We had been hiring and opening position through the pandemic. We have recently reinforced the commercial area, looking for new opportunities. We have opened some position in our offices. So yeah, it's interesting. We have been reinforcing the exploration team through the pandemic. That's it. Yep.
Yeah, good. Thanks. That's good insight. Zach, you trying to mine as much gold as you possibly can, or what?
Yeah. Yeah, as a large producer of gold, we've been doing fairly well since this pandemic. But we've also been able to give money back to the community, both through programs, a COVID task force that the governor set up, as well as give money directly to employees, as call them chamber checks, which can only really be spent in town, which generated nearly $1 million for the town, giving money to the food banks. So we've been doing pretty well financially. We haven't had any major layoffs. Production, just like Joaquin said, we slight decrease in production at the beginning of it, but we came full force once the pandemic came, and we put our measures in place that we can keep our people safe and keep the community safe as well. That was always number one, right? If we're not taking care of ourselves and the communities, then we won't have jobs and won't provide for our families.
Yeah, that's a good point, and yeah, interesting that you've been able to give back a little bit of that to the community. I know, obviously, Newmont and Barrick are big. Now Nevada Gold Mines are a big part of Elko. So yeah. Susan.
Again, in the consulting community, I think it's just been, a financial advantage, if one could say that, in that, we've all been busy. It's a lot of due diligence has come our way personally through our company. A lot of companies checking out other companies and specifically checking out projects, lots of purchases and deals being made. The cost to us really hasn't increased very much. We've had to buy some of the PPE out there, but really just trying to find it, particularly at the beginning, was the challenge. And now suppliers seem to have been built up a lot of their stock, so you can get masks, you can get hand sanitizers and things like that. Right. In Canada, the testing, we don't have to pay for it. It is done through the medical system here. In different provinces, it is, more challenging. Ontario, they just had so many people wanting to have tests done that really they restricted it to just people traveling internationally before they left. So I know, some people that had to go in and say, yes, they are about to travel just so they get tested before they go into their work site. So some companies have had to pay for private testing. I'm not sure how much that's working, and then just the delay in getting the results just because of the high demand. And some of the delays, again, for the consulting industry is that, well, the assay labs are swamped. There's so much drilling and so much sampling going on that the delays in getting results, it's costing time. We have everything scheduled. We're going to do all these different resource estimates for different companies, and things are getting moved down the schedule because we don't have the assay results back yet. And diamond drills are, they're all booked up until April or even May sometimes of next year, depending on which companies that you contact. So I mean, those cost financially because you can't move your project forward. So we're getting into some pretty busy times. And yeah, as Erika said, it's finding personnel and finding people, drilling companies trying to find drillers. Those are some of the costs of what's going on, particularly for gold projects.
Right. Yeah. So we had an interesting question here from the audience regarding, how do you, we were just talking about gold prices being good for gold mining companies, and how do you discuss that with people, maybe even the community, in terms of, celebrating that you're working while they're not. So how do we explain to our families and friends in public that we're busy and working away while they aren't?
Well, they're struggling. Some members of the community, yeah, some of the jobs getting hit the hardest. I mean, I have neighbors that work in the service industry, that work in restaurants, that work in the stores, things like that. So it's a bit hard to be so busy and so occupied when others around us and in our communities and in the communities that we're visiting are struggling and so I think some companies are just trying to expand some of the people that they would typically hire and hire, again, more locally, like Erika was saying, locally from within the community and try and bridge some of those gaps that are developing.
Yes, and I want to say also that, I mean, I understand having the pandemic right now is extremely difficult for everybody, but there are up and downs in a regular economy. And if we look back 2009 or 2016, it was extremely hard for us in the mining industry to find a job, where it was not, because gold is totally decorrelated with what's going on in the regular market, right? So when you think about that, I know that this situation is slightly different because we're talking about pandemic. However, it's not just the mining industry that is profiting from whatever is going on right now. There's also a lot of technologies. And so I'm just saying that we're not just us geologists working right now. There's a lot more. And I think there's just going to be a switch because people cannot really find jobs. You got to work from home. So it looks like overall people are starting to switch because you got to find another job. You got to do something else, right? So I think it's just supporting the family and supporting friends into either finding something else or trying to find help with the government, for example, etc. It's extremely difficult question, and yes, it's also difficult to celebrate in those hard times, but at the same time, to me, you got to take advantage to what you have at this present moment, and because it's important, and you just gotta live your life and move forward. To me, it's all about moving forward.
Thanks. Yeah, so I'm just curious, has anybody noticed pushback from the community trying to actually shut down operations or suggesting that people should not be working? Particularly maybe Zach or Joaquin, have you heard of anything like that?
Here, people really want to stay open and running. And what we've done and what I've seen is, people supporting the businesses in town, be it getting gift cards and spending them later, or taking maybe one more night out or one more takeout during the week to support those businesses as best as they can. Everyone's kind of made do what they can, right? If do more takeout, especially in town for the restaurants and bars. Nevada has an no open container laws. So to-go drinks have been quite popular in town. Buy dinner, get a drink kind of deal, which has helped. So we've supported them through the people who are able to work, supported those communities, the restaurant, bar industry, or small business in town through those measures.
Yeah, from the exploration side, here in Chile team, so far we have got a really good response from communities. No, not negative response or not letting us in. There been a very good response from them. So
it's good to hear.
Positive.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to question 3. We've kind of touched on this a little bit, but it's around operations. And the question is just, how has the pandemic impacted field work and office work? And I guess I'd like everybody to also kind of preface that with how much time were you spending in the field before versus now, and kind of how that may have changed. Sue, you want to start?
Sure. As a resource estimator, I most of my time is spent here at home. I do the site visit for 3 or 4 days or for a week, depending on how advanced the project is. Sometimes 2 weeks if it's a large operating mine. But most of my work has always been at home, crunching the numbers and writing the 43-101. So there hasn't been a change in that. As I was saying earlier, it is just the logistics of the site visit and how reasonable it is. There's some countries that I am no-go in any time pre-pandemic, and just for personal safety reasons. And I think most of them are probably pretty common to a lot of people. But certainly now within the pandemic and kids at home, and it's, you have to choose carefully which countries you're willing to venture into at this point. And then, like I said, that quarantine when you get home, how valuable is a 14-day quarantine after a 2-day site visit? But you just get to sit there and do the work and have nothing else to focus on because you can't leave the quarantine that you're in. So those are, it's pretty limited change for me, other than like those critical decisions on whether to take the job or if I need to contact the commission and negotiate a site visit deferral.
Thanks. Yeah, Erika.
Well, it was kind of the beginning of the year was a little slow. Obviously, it was a lot of office work. But I have to say, anytime from August up until now, I've probably spent accumulated 1 month at home and the rest in the field. And for the simple reason is you can't travel. So when you go in the field, you stay in the field. That's what you do, right? Before that, you just used to travel every week, every 2 weeks, and back and forth. You want to go home for a weekend because you don't have much time, but you can do it. Today, it's hard to find a flight. So even if you could do it without quarantine, there's no flights. So you cannot go home as you wish. And that's the reason why I want to say I spend a lot more time in the field than I thought that I would at that point.
And which countries are you visiting mostly?
So because Canada is closed right now, I'm in between US and Mexico. So I'm just across the border. I live in New Mexico. So it makes things a lot easier. But obviously when you go to New Mexico, you still have to quarantine. So you stay home for 2 weeks and then you're back you're back in the field when you need it.
Right, right. Okay. Joaquin, any changes to your operations?
Yes, absolutely. Well, as I said, the measure that BHP took at the beginning of the pandemic was suspension of all of the field activities while the crisis was evolving. I think there are two parts of this question. Is the first one is how has changed the office work. So as I say, we split the team in two, and that has been challenging. I think, particularly for geologists, for exploration geologists, and for also for production geologists or any kind of geologists. I think we are really used to having geological discussion all gathered together in the same room, surrounding a map or a cross section where you can point with your finger. Some others are really good at making hand gestures to explain
Like
faulting or stratigraphically horizons. And from one day to another, you are looking at a map on your screen. You cannot make your hand gesture. So it's been different. It's been challenging, but not for that reason it's been worse. I think it's a different way of working. But we have got very good results working from this way. So I think it's as Erika said, I think it's the new normal, and we need to get used to it. We have demonstrated that we can do the work, we can complete our goals working from this way. And fieldwork, we are slowly retaking fieldwork under very strict measures, so it has changed a lot. We are trying to get less people on the field. That's one of the measures. And we are doing testing for all employees or contractors before going to the field. And in terms of accommodation, we are now accommodating 1 people per room with a single bathroom, so no shared bathroom, just 1 room, 1 people, 1 bathroom. The same applies for trucks. Now we are just allowing 3 people maximum in a single truck. So yeah, you have increased cost. That's not up on that. You have a little bit of increasing cost, mainly in terms of logistics. I was talking to the superintendent of exploration of operations the other day, and we did a little calculation, and he was calculating some from 20 to 30% increase in logistics, in logistics costs for this new normal field work. But I think we are doing it. I think the question here was, can we do exploration activities during a pandemic? I think the question is yes, we are currently doing it. It's challenging, it's demanding, but we are there. We are right now doing geophysical activities in northern Chile. So far, we haven't had any troubles, any health problem that with our employees or contractor. So I think that the answer is yes, we can do exploration during a pandemic.
Great. Thanks. Zach, any comments on impacts of fieldwork versus office work?
Well, at the beginning of the pandemic, we definitely sent people to the in-town offices. Limited number of people per room. We've had 3 or 4 buildings that we were able to bring people in, and some of the people who are a little more hands-on and attached to their job came out to site probably a little more than they were planning, but so be it. We slowly reincorporated people back into sites to do more their office work. In terms of field work, definitely from the geology point, those who could do work from town did. Ore control was a main priority, so we definitely kept those geologists there. currently, I mean, everyone's doing field work, logging core, logging chips, kicking glass holes, field mapping. We're in full swing production. We're doing fairly well now using face masks whenever we're in close proximity to people at your desk or in the bus. Proper PPE, sanitizing whenever you can, right? And just keeping distance, that 6-foot distance we have. So it's impacted the beginning of it, but right around midsummer, we started bringing everyone back. And I think we do pretty well for the size of the town and the size of the company as well.
Great, thanks. So I just want to point out we're getting close to the hour mark, and we were supposed to have that last 30 minutes for question and answer. I've been kind of staying up with questions, so I think we're doing okay on that. I think we'll go ahead and continue. There were 2 questions here that I think are both really pertinent to what we were just discussing. One was, have any companies changed which countries or jurisdictions they're focusing on as a result of the pandemic? For example, halting work in certain countries if COVID rules are too strict, or if there are too many cases, or going ahead in countries where better financial support can be guaranteed. If anybody'd like to touch on that one. And then, yeah, go ahead. If there's anybody who wanted to answer that.
I haven't heard of companies switching. I've seen them putting projects on hold. I've seen them looking specifically for consultants within the country so that they can't bring, they don't want to bring people in, or they can't get people to go in. Nobody wants to go into a country that is, out of control with the amount of cases maybe that they have. So they've been trying to find more local consultants, but yeah, I haven't seen any company specifically, switching their perspective, or they might be looking closer to home for some of them, but I think some of that too, we won't see in the short term. I think it'll be a bit more long-term, how they change their strategies.
Yes, and I just have to say, it's kind of difficult to switch countries like you want. This is not really an option most of the time. So because as mining companies, you have your project places, you have your commitment. So this is not an option as of switching as you wish. Then when it comes to changing jurisdiction countries, I know for Riverside, we have our team directly in the countries that we work. So in Mexico, we have a Mexico team, as well as in Canada, we have a Canadian team. So in that case, we do not need to halt any work whatsoever, which is pretty good. And just like Susan mentioned, what's happening, I think, for a lot of companies, especially major companies that cannot travel anymore, that is extremely restricted, they tend to hire people from the countries. So they hire over companies to do the job for them. So it gets pretty interesting then.
Okay. I'll save the last question for the Q&A. And so the question 4 for our panel was pandemic learning outcomes. What has your company learned from the pandemic? The challenges that had to be overcome, any new concepts and ideas that are likely to stick around post-pandemic, i.e. teleworking or remote digitalization. Zach, you want to start?
Yeah, I think it's been challenging with the size of the company, the number of sites, and just the general idea of Elko of being the hub of the northeast of Nevada. So keeping everybody healthy has been primary, as well as seeing that what can we do to minimize our risk. If you can work from town, work from town. But overall, we've been pretty good at practicing hygiene, and we've seen where we can pick up on, is there too many people in the buses, just to begin with before. So you kind of look at your procedures that you've been doing and what can change, right? With sites like Gold Strike and Gold Quarry, we've been around for decades, right? Some of those procedures have been there for a long time. So it was a good way for us to revamp current procedures to make them better and progress forward.
So do you think a lot of those are going to stay in place?
I think some of them may stay in place. Depends on production, really. I mean, we're moving gold. It's a highly prolific district, right? So we'll see how far this goes, but I think some of it will definitely stay in place.
Cool. Thanks. Joaquin?
Yeah, I would say the biggest challenge here with this new way of working is effective communication, I would say, especially for us as geologists. I think, as Erika said, it's really weird to be working from home from a long period of time, and I think it's also a little bit harder to try to, as Erika said, to sell your project, to sell your idea, to communicate your ideas when we are really used to be present, to be showing in the same room. I think so. I think one of the biggest challenge here is effective communication. In terms of the new concept that we are now seeing, at least when I entered BHP in 2018, so the company was already promoting some remote work. They call the program the flex work. So they were promoting employees to, if they want to work from home from 2 days a week, you can arrange with your boss. You can agree to do that. I personally never took that possibility, and I think the pandemic, what has helped is to put us to get all in this remote working, and it has accelerated the process. I think BHP wanted to their employees to start using the flex work to combine more the work with life. And I think it has accelerated the process. I think we have now all been in remote working, and we have learned that we can work like this way. We can work from home. It works, you know. So I think pandemic helped to accelerate the process of remotization, and at least here in Chile, that it was not very common to work from home.
Yeah. Did you see more people who kind of have accepted that? You said you had not taken that opportunity before.
Yeah,
Do you
definitely.
think you're more likely to in the future, or?
Yeah, definitely. I have seen a lot of people that have loved the working from home, that had never tried before. Me personally, I still like to go to the office, but I knew a lot of people that love working from home, and they never had do it before. So yeah, definitely there will be some learning there.
Yeah, great, thanks. Sue.
I think some of the changes are, as either as Joaquin has already said too, it's the communication. People have learned these new skills of communicating to groups, to teams, knowing, really having to work a lot harder to pull teams together and to make that communication effective, and bringing in communication coaches. I've seen some majors doing that kind of thing, and really working on some training on how to communicate better when you can't just pull the whole team into a room, that you have to do it virtually like this. I think some of the other things I was thinking about was, even just the large consulting company I used to work for, they never would have allowed anybody to work from home. I know even 15 years ago, we were trying to, I'm just sitting here at my computer all day, working on a project by myself. Why do I have to do it at the office? No, we want to see you in the office every day. Right. And so, consulting companies, particularly the larger firms, had a lot of expensive office space in Vancouver or Toronto or any of the major centers. And I think they're realizing now, in terms of the cost efficiency of having these smaller teams, work from home. And then, if you need to do a team group thing, then yeah, maybe that team is in the office that day. So they're getting to save some money on office space. And I think a lot of them are considering that downsizing opportunity. And I think for workers, for everybody else, it's that work-life balance that there's been some rethinking in a lot of people of how they want to balance that work-life commitment and have a bit more life. Go out for that walk instead of doing that extra hour of work, getting outside, because we are more inside now. We are more doing these things. And, there's been a little bit of that move back to nature and people leaving the cities, coming into smaller communities. We do live in a smaller community outside of Vancouver that is a ferry ride away, and there's no more houses for sale here. The minute a for sale sign goes up, it's gone. And so people are leaving those urban centers and coming further out. So companies are going to have to get used to the fact that their workforce is moving and in transition themselves. So there's, I think, a lot of, people are, like I said, they're rethinking how they're going to balance everything going forward.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Erika.
Well, I just want to bring up something that is particularly interesting is conferences. So a lot of conferences either got canceled this year or went online. Here we are, right? And I was part of the Precious Metals Summit this year from Beaver Creek, which was online. It's particularly interesting. It's extremely tiring, surprisingly, because staring at a screen at all time for the whole day. And actually, that was a question for Joaquin at some point that I had is, when you were doing geology on your screen, was it like more tiring than actual fieldwork? It's just, to me, it's terrible. I'm sorry, I'm a field person. I need to move, I need to meet people, and changing right away, and it's a right away change, and it's difficult, right? Then when it comes to conferences, that means that you're meeting with people all around the world, and you have to deal with time zone. That's another one too, that can be extremely challenging, and there is nothing you can do about it. You just gotta work at night when you need to work at night, right? And that last point is the virtual field visit that we mentioned earlier. That's, we all started, like a lot of companies started to put something together as of how is this thing gonna turn into using drones, using videos and talking to the camera. It gets really weird, to be honest. But you gotta do it. You gotta try it. You just gotta try it and see how people react. And I think people are gonna get used to it little bit by little bit. But once things are gonna get back to more or less normal, like the previous normal, I think that we're still going to have a lot of technologies and a lot of different innovation like this that's going to stick around, but not as much as we're using today or we're going to use in the next year. I think people are eager to get back to meeting face-to-face, to get back on the plane, to get back in the field, visiting, having a beer with somebody else. I think we all look forward to that.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you. Those are good insights. So that's the end of our formal Q&A, but I wanted to just, our formal discussion. Now we have about 20 minutes left for Q&A. I see a few questions that popped up, and I've also got kind of some continuation of what we were just talking about. So people in that last question on learning outcomes touched on technology, but there's another question here more specific about new or innovative approaches that the companies have been implementing in order to continue educational and training opportunities for geologists and staff during the pandemic. And I just wanted to add on to that, is there such a thing as a student field trip anymore? I mean, how are things going in that regard? Anybody want to take that on?
So in my case, we have been doing online courses. August, we had one with Scott Haley, but all online, and it's been super good. I mean, super positive. All Scott was in Australia. All people here was on South America. The Ecuador office, the Peru office, and the Chile office were connected. So there was no troubles on that. I mean, it was a very good experience. I would say very positive.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we've had a couple geology courses, some modules to get our new geologists up to speed on stratigraphy or our igneous dikes. They're in person. They're limiting the number of people per modular class to, I think, 6 in a fairly large conference room. And that's basically what we've done here at NGM.
Okay. Erika, you mentioned like virtual field trips. Has anybody seen a good virtual field trip where you really felt like it was a good way to do things?
Not yet, not yet. But I look forward to it. I think the SCG is going to do one, right?
Yes,
So,
they are. Yeah.
So I can't wait to see how it works. I don't personally work on that. You know, bring up some ideas, that's one thing, but working on it, you got to be particularly, you got to feel comfortable with technologies.
Right.
And to actually put together something like this. And so we'll see. We'll see. Actually, we've been working with Spotlight Mining to actually put together some of those field visit insights when it comes to Riverside's project. And it's been extremely interesting. So look forward to see the results.
Yeah. Let's see what else we've got here. Yeah, I think we touched on continuing the education. So I had a question here about, has the pandemic caused significant logistical delays, especially when products have to cross a border? You know, getting sample bags, for example, or drill rigs or things across a border. And same thing with analytical results. I think we touched on labs having backups before. Does anybody know, is that a personnel issue on the lab side or just that many more samples?
Well, if you don't mind me to start with that.
Yeah, go for it.
So yes, there is some delay. I know that in Nevada, it can go pretty crazy right now, especially because of the big jump in investment, in the recent investment in the mining industry. Everybody's drilling. And it was just the perfect time to be drilling as well. So everything goes to the lab, and now you just gotta wait. Or just like Susan was mentioning earlier, there's no rig. Look for a rig. So you gotta kind of think in advance a little bit. So some of us, we're not expecting it. Then you have to deal with the time and you have to postpone it as much as you can. And then, yes, there's cost incurred to that, unfortunately. But now that you know what's going on and you just have to think about what's going to come up and how much drilling and how much money there is in the industry to really plan ahead for that.
Sue, it looked like you had something else to say.
Yeah, it was just, you know, a couple of the labs that I have contacted. It is a big personnel issue. They're having a hard time. And then the training that they need for that staff. And then particularly when the lab is in a big urban center, they're having problems with some of their staff getting sick and not being able to come to work. In terms of suppliers, though, yeah, I'm not sure. I think it just depends on the specific item and where it originates from. I know some of the things that have been trying to, you know, to get from China that are China produced are having a hard time or significant delays in delivery. But I think mostly it's personnel, the drilling, and this always happens when we have these upswings too. Some even have the drill rigs, but they don't have the personnel, or suddenly, another company is offering a few more dollars per hour. And so drillers are migrating around between all the companies. So it'll, hopefully it'll settle soon, and we'll, as with everything, we'll adjust to these new wait times.
Yeah. So there was a comment by Joaquin earlier about struggling with work-life balance when you're always working from home and maybe you're working all night. There's a question here I thought was pertinent to that, which was, what are companies doing to monitor how staff are doing on a mental wellness front? Anybody have any experience with that?
Yeah, well, as I say, from the major company at the beginning and on mid-pandemic, we had to complete a wellness survey, and that's how the company was monitoring the mental health aspect. As I say, also they put a massive amount of mental health resources. For the first time in 27 years of my life, I put attention to mental health, and I found it's a fascinating world. The way your mind works, understanding your emotions. I think it's something that we really need to pay more attention to it. So I think it's a very good question.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Joaquin that, as geologists, we spend a lot of time in the field, sometimes by ourselves, sometimes just in pairs for weeks on end, or get up, go to work, come home, go to bed, rinse and repeat. So I think it's really put a light on the kind of lifestyle we all live. Some think it's better than others. Some people try and, don't succeed. It's difficult. So I think it's definitely shed light on the type of work we do and the hours we put in, and then, the help that we do need mentally.
I think in some of the conferences that I've been to, particularly in the last couple of years, mental health issues have started to move into the talk circuit, particularly at CIM. VIA did a huge study a couple of years ago. They released the results where they had a psychologist professor go in and do a study on the employees and the level of stress, the level of depression, the level of, that was a groundbreaking study for a mining company to undertake on their workforce. So I think a lot more companies are starting to address these issues and try and find ways to support their workers. And it's still, I think, for a lot of the cases in the development stage, but I think certainly this pandemic has brought a lot of that work quickly forward, and they're trying to find ways to support workers that are struggling.
Yeah. It seems like, in the general population, the sentiment is that there's a little bit of fear, but I'm hearing from a lot of you guys that the companies are taking care of things. Would you say you feel more safe at work than maybe out in the general public, or?
I certainly do, because my work's at home. Except, for that trip out to Finland, where that was a total exposure that just felt very isolating, to be that far away, certainly in these times of uncertainty when rules change so quickly. I had a friend that was locked down in Colombia for about 3 months. He couldn't leave to get back home to his country in Italy. And so that was a really frustrating time for him to try and deal with all the emotions that were coming at him over dealing with that. So sometimes if you are doing all that international work, the rules can change so quickly that you can get stuck at sites. And so those are challenging moments too.
For sure. All right, I got another question here from a graduating environmental geoscience student who's contemplating whether he should go look for work or whether he should stick around and do a master's. Any thoughts on whether this is a good time to go out in the industry, get started?
There's so many jobs out there, so many people looking for workers, and so I think it's probably a good time to get some experience under your belt. But that's just my opinion on that one. You know, make your money and get your experience when people are just scrambling and desperate for workers on projects.
I would say you can do both, right? I was in your spot a couple years ago, in 2016, just graduating undergrad. Not the best time in the market, but still applied for jobs, still looked at a master's program, and then made that decision, a couple months later. And I think I came out okay doing the master's and getting to where I am today. But I know people here who right after undergrad got a job and then are doing well in the mining industry. So I think you have time for both now. I would definitely recommend apply to grad school, apply for jobs, and see where it takes you. Maybe you don't get into any schools, but you land an excellent, job somewhere else, or vice versa, no jobs, and your dream master's program comes along. You won't know until you try both.
Good advice. Very good advice. So there was another question here, similar theme about, if there's any recommendations on how to go about looking for work at this time. Conferences aren't happening in person anyway. It kind of limits the kind of one-on-ones. Anybody have any advice for people who may be looking for work right now?
Well, this is actually very interesting. I think there's a lot of building up a network. I think now LinkedIn works pretty well because people tend to go on LinkedIn a lot since they cannot meet anymore. I've noticed that there is a lot more movement now on those social media, professional social media. Just want to make sure. But then, yes, there's a lot of knowing somebody in the industry type of thing going on. I know that my first job, I found it on Indeed, which most of the time it's kind of unbelievable when you think about junior companies. But it's possible. You just gotta try everything. You just gotta just throw your resume out there and talk to people in the mining industry, and they'll find something for you at some point. That's the way I would do it.
Yeah, from my personal experience, I would recommend to apply to every graduate program that you could find. And I say this from my own experience. As a person I graduated from geology. I had no contacts in the mining industry. I knew no one. I had no experience neither. And I applied to BHP from the website, from applying to the graduate program, and that's how I get to BHP. Then sent me to Escondida, then back to exploration. But I got a job from nothing, just applying to a graduate program. And I think the question is coming from assume to graduate geo. So my recommendation is search for every graduate program that you will find in the industry. I think a lot of major companies are offering them, and apply to everyone.
Yeah, it's just get out there and particularly maybe pick an area too that's maybe more local to you, because companies are going to be looking for those local availabilities if that is applicable in your case. And yeah, my first job, I didn't know anybody in the mining industry either. I rented a car in Val-d'Or and I drove from Val-d'Or to Timmins, and I stopped at every operation on the way and dropped off a resume and ended up working for Sarco at their gold mine outside of Timmins there. But if you can't do it physically, then do it virtually and just pick an area and go through it and just call them up and apply. Send look at their website. They may have a contact us, and just send them your resume, and somebody's going to catch it, or somebody's going to know somebody that's looking.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right. I think probably this will be our last question unless something really intriguing comes up. So there's lots of online sharing going on right now, whether it's this event we're doing now or conferences and things. In fact, I've seen a lot of student chapters of SEG doing Zoom presentations, which are, is a fantastic way of connecting everybody. Any thoughts on, other than focusing on SEG stuff, how do you decide what's important to attend versus not? I think you could go to a lunch every single day at this point.
Well, that's actually a good question. I think it just depends what you're interested in, simply. If you're more technical, if you're more finance oriented or whatever, I think that's what matters at the end. It's what you want to hear. That's and then you just, give the time that you have to give.
Yeah, I find I really have to go and search out the websites of the associations like SAG or some of the resource estimation groups that I know, and really research the talks that are coming up and keeping track, because there are so many coming out now, and it is hard to keep track of them all and whether they're going to be pertinent to what you're interested in. But have it on the go while you're getting your work done. We're all sitting here at home or in front of our computers, and I typically have a talk or two playing in the background every week. So yeah, there's a lot of information pouring out there now that people are adjusting to that virtual format, and it's only going to get busier. So it's keep an eye on your favorite associations or groups and see what they're projecting out there.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly seems like it's, the stress this has put on the system is leading to some fascinating changes and some really neat opportunities in addition to the struggles that are going on right now. So I really appreciate everybody being here, taking the time to share their thoughts. And yeah, I would encourage everybody to take a look at the academia presentation tomorrow. That'd be 9 a.m. Mountain Time. So thanks everybody for being a part of the session.
Thank you for inviting us. It was
Yes,
a pleasure.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And very
Thank you.
nice to meet you, Susan, Zach, and Joaquin. I guess Susan, we already know each other, but.
Alrighty. Thanks everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
You
Have a
too.
good day.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night.